106 miles to Chicago.
Full tank of gas.
Half a pack of cigarettes.
It's dark. I'm wearing sunglasses.
Hit it.
With season 2 of The Bear wrapping up to high critic and audience praise, I began searching the internet for something to feed my back-of-the-house restaurant obsession. But upon scoring through streaming services and finding a whole host of options to feed my fix, I started to wonder, how did we get here? Food, beyond being what we need to survive, is comforting. With most of humanity having long since moved away from being hunters and gatherers, many of us are able to look at food as a luxury. Often there's a sense of community surrounding it as well. Family dinner, having lunch with friends, or even afternoon tea. Mealtimes give us a sense of harmony and momentary calm. Eating can help us maintain stress or even take us out of a fight or flight mode, to the point where we even overeat to maintain that good feeling. And dopamine is a hell of a drug. So it's not much of a surprise with the act of eating being so pleasurable, we would also enjoy watching food be prepared as well. And who wouldn't want to unwind by watching an entertaining host prepare a gorgeous meal? We can imagine the smells and what it might taste like, indulging in the joy of the meal even if we're not eating it. Watching vegetables be chopped and sauces be prepared, it can be hypnotizing to witness. As a kid unable to sleep at night and watching the only thing that was on in the 90s at 3 a.m., infomercials, my favorites were always the ones that had to do with cooking. Different kitchen gadgets and contraptions that, in all honesty, most people never really needed. But come on, who didn't want the Ronco Showtime rotisserie and barbecue?
Anybody can do this. I'll put it in my machine and...
Instructional cooking has been around since before TV was even a thing, with cooking programs being featured on the radio. Exactly 100 years ago, in 1923, Dr. Edouard Dupommier, a food scientist who wrote dozens of cookbooks and hosted the weekly show on Radio Paris, where he told stories of his work in the kitchen and shared recipes with his listeners. By 1926, the US had created a nationwide radio program called the Betty Crocker Cooking School of the Air, where the fictional character of Betty Crocker, played by 13 different actresses across the country, would answer questions and give tips to their listeners about cooking. Once televisions began entering the homes in the late 1930s, TV stations needed a low-cost production to fill a 30 or even 60-minute time slot, and cooking shows were it. In 1937, the BBC featured a 5-part series, Cook's Night Out, featuring Marcel Boulstein, a popular French chef and restaurateur. His first 15-minute segment was how to make an omelette. There is no surviving footage of this series, as the methods to record or live broadcasting hadn't even been invented yet. In 1963, one of the first cooking shows was launched in the US called The French Chef, and it was hosted by Julia Childs, co-author of the cookbook Mastering the Art of French Cooking. It was immensely popular and aired 206 episodes from 1963 to 1973, and with reruns continuing on until 2010. In 1983, Warner Brothers Discovery Network launched The Food Network, a cable channel devoted to cooking shows and other programming relating to food. Cooking shows were just as much about entertainment as they were about instructions, and as the hosts of these shows became more comfortable in their roles, certain personalities started to rise to the top. As they became more and more popular, these chefs were elevated to the level of celebrity. This was your Bobby Flay, Emeril Lagasse, Alton Brown, Paula Deen, Ina Garten, Rachel Ray, and even non-chef but avid food lover, Guy Fieri.
Camera's not on, is it?
They opened up a world of possibilities by making cooking more accessible to the everyday person and answering the age-old question, what's for dinner? They were full of positive, upbeat energy and made you feel good about food. Watching them, you felt like, hey, maybe one day I will make my own pasta.
But they were all of them deceived. In the land of Mordor, in the fires of Mount Doom, the Dark Lord forged in secret a master to control all others. And into this he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. One to rule them all.
Gordon Ramsay's Boiling Point, released in 1999 in the UK. The foul-mouthed chef soon won favor with audiences and later starred in Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares and Hell's Kitchen. In 2005, the Fox network introduced Ramsay to American viewers in a US version of Hell's Kitchen, and audiences loved him. This foul-mouthed, abrasive chef built up his fan base, not to see him cook, but to watch him eviscerate inept underlings. Who hasn't wanted to lose their shit at someone else's incompetence? And Ramsay gave audiences a vicarious release by screaming at someone who'd messed up, something that, for whatever reason, they themselves were unable to do. Maybe it was an unqualified boss whose mistakes you were constantly fixing, or a belligerent customer who'd made your stressful day that much worse by complaining, or just the stress of life in general. It felt good to watch someone who deserved to be yelled at get yelled at. These reality shows gave a sneak peek behind the curtain of exactly what goes on after you give the waiter your order. Growing up on this new breed of television, people were able to now see that having a novel-sized menu from a chain restaurant was actually a bad thing, and it was better to have limited options than to risk ordering something that was made last week and popped into a microwave.
Yes! Later, Chef Mike! Yeah!
The 2000s brought the rise of social media, and with people ever hunting for likes and thus taking and posting photos of anything really vaguely interesting in front of them, the foodie was born. Now, the term foodie has been around since the 1980s, but social media has rebranded it so that the person you think of when you say foodie is someone who lets their food get cold while they get the best shot for their Instagram. But foodie influencers who actually make it on social media can be big business for restaurants, and this signaled a change for millennials with regards to food culture. Chain restaurants like Chili's and Applebee's were being passed over for local dives and much anticipated pop-ups. The younger generation wanted their dishes to appeal to their senses and for their meal to be an experience rather than just to give in and eat because you're hungry. It became worth it to eat out less at casual restaurants in order to save up for one really great meal from a restaurant they saw on their Instagram feed. So with the popularity of reality shows featuring high personality chefs and social media awash in photos of everyone's dinner, it wasn't long until Hollywood wanted in on the action. And who better to steal the first piece of the cheese than the mouse? Released in 2007, Ratatouille is the story of Remy, a rat with dreams of becoming a chef. He does this with the help of Linguini, a clueless human whom Remy can control by pulling on his hair so that Linguini can perform the actions of Remy and earn a place as a chef in a French kitchen. And it's a great film! Putting aside the fact that everyone in Paris speaks English because parents don't want to be reading subtitles to their kids for 90 minutes, it's a heartwarming tale of persevering against all obstacles and following your dreams even if the people in your life are telling you not to do it. And something that I really enjoyed is that the movie takes the time to explain how an actual kitchen functions, who does what, and the basic techniques of how to be a chef.
What are you doing?
I'm cutting vegetables. I'm cutting the vegetables.
No, you waste energy and time. You think cooking is a cute job, eh? Like mommy in the kitchen? Well, mommy never had to face the dinner rush with the orders come flooding in and every dish is different and none are simple at all at the different cooking times, but must arrive on the customer's table at exactly the same time, hot and perfect. Every second counts and you cannot be mommy!
Completely unrealistic for a rat to run a kitchen, but the message is good.
I killed a man with this thumb.
In 2009, Julie and Julia was released, a feel-good comedy drama focusing on the dual lives of famous chef Julia Childs and fameless Julie Powell.
Julie Powell, once the editor of the Amherst Literary Magazine, the one we all knew would be the one, temped for 8 years before giving up on her novel, and now works in a cubicle as a mid-level bureaucrat attempting to deal with the after effects of 9/11.
A blogger who spent an entire year cooking all 524 recipes in Childs' cookbook, Mastering the Art of French Cooking. We get to follow along with Julia Child, played by the always wonderful Meryl Streep, as she finds her way through the male-dominated world of professional cooking with the loving support of her husband, played by the one, the only, the Tucci.
Oh my God, she's coming to get me!
Dog, Mr. Herc?
No, her!
Who?
You know her! Oh my God, she knows my name! She knows everything! She's coming to take my soul!
Can we please get another film with Meryl Streep and Stanley Tucci together, because they have the best on-screen chemistry together, and between this and The Devil Wears Prada, it is just not enough. On the other side of the story, we have Amy Adams playing Julie, a woman dissatisfied with her trajectory in life who only finds solace in cooking and decides to inspire herself by cooking her way through Julia's cookbook with all of us along for the ride. It is cute, it's heartwarming, and I love it. But the happy-go-lucky merry-go-round of food-based entertainment could not stay sweet forever, and like Batman, we had to get darker.
His name is Bane.
Now is not the time for fear.
That comes later.
Burnt is the 2015 film showing the undeserved comeback of Adam Jones, a high-class chef who destroyed his life and career with drugs and alcohol, played by Bradley Cooper. This guy is a piece of shit, and not only does he destroy the lives of his former colleagues, he then comes back and demands that they help him rebuild his image and manipulates situations so that they either have to ask him for his help or they will lose everything. I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but I am 100% on Michelle's side here. This film did not do well with critics or audiences, but it started us down a path of witnessing the so-called torture genius of high-class chefs.
I have almost everything I own invested in this restaurant.
Or these guys are just assholes. But that brings us to 2022's The Menu, a cat and mouse comedy horror that pits Anya Taylor-Joy's Margot against Ray Fiennes' psychotic chef Julian Slowik in a battle to see who comes out on top. By far my favorite film about chefs or kitchens or restaurants or any of it.
These are tortillas. Tortillas deliciosas.
Yeah, so what are these?
These are tortillas.
It's smart, it's darkly funny, it's beautifully shot, and as wonderful as Taylor-Joy and Fiennes are, Nicholas Hoult as the obnoxious, pretentious, foodie Tyler almost steals the entire show. The Menu brings into focus everything wrong with high-end restaurants. Food should be about enjoyment and community, but at $1,500 per person, only the 1% could ever afford it. The dishes have become so cerebral that they don't even exist, and the staff has become so overly consumed with Slowik, a man they seem to deify, that they work with cult-like mentalities and will even commit horrific acts to please him. And while we could look at The Menu and think, this is a great film with an undoubtedly horrible subject matter, barely more than a decade ago we were celebrating Gordon Ramsay's annihilation of those considered substandard chefs. And yeah, what Ramsay was doing wasn't nearly as bad as what Slowik was doing to the characters in The Menu, but with Ramsay it was real. He was actually screaming in those people's faces. That was really happening in front of us, and yet we all cheered it. It was forgivable for chefs to be assholes who treated everybody in their lives like garbage because their precision and attention to detail was just so magnificent. And the food that they made was just so good. And you can't fake good food. You can't convince a steak to be tender or pay off a chicken to be more flavorful. You either did it right or you didn't. And taste buds will know. But like any good menu, attitudes have changed. Even Gordon Ramsay's red-faced rage eventually began wearing on viewers, and with his guest judging on MasterChef Junior and doing interviews with his kids, viewers got to see a softer side of the rough chef, which helped to rebrand him as a nice guy who only took his frustrations out on people who deserved it and increased his popularity. Which is a big reason why The Bear is probably so deservingly popular. Carmen Berzado is a flawed individual who definitely loses his cool more than once, but he acknowledges his mistakes and works to grow from them. He's massively successful, but never rubs it in anyone's face. If anything, he seems to be overtaken by imposter syndrome, never feeling like his work is good enough. He embodies how a lot of us feel, full of passion but overwhelmed with the weight of life's foot pressing on the back of your neck. Finally feeling like something is starting to go right, only for it all start to crumble around the edges. This is a guy you're rooting for even when he's being a jerk, because you see everything that built up to make him finally explode, and in some ways you're screaming right along with him for Marcus to do his job or for Richie to get out of his own ass. And that's another thing The Bear gets right, is its supporting characters. Tina getting over herself to realize she can still learn new things and embracing doing so. Sydney learning to overcome her anxiety to take another risk even though the stress still has her running outside to puke her guts out. And Richie. I love Richie. This guy started out as someone I wanted to punch in the face, and now I'm rooting for him more than anyone.
Don't be scared. Chef.
And that's how you write a good character arc. So hopefully with the success of The Bear, the unapologetic assholery is on its way out. Because one thing's for sure, our love of food is here to stay.
It's 106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark. and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.